Surgery is sex, isn't it?
Is it?
You know it is. Surgery is the new sex.
I don't like what's happening with the body. In particular, what's happening with my body.
Surgery is sex.
Espera, hemos tenido un inconveniente de última hora, pero bueno, creo que la espera también, un invitado como el que tenemos hoy lo merece, ¿no? Podríamos estar hasta una hora esperándole, porque creo que la ocasión bien lo merece. Vamos a hacer la rueda de prensa de uno de los premios Donostia de este año, como sabéis es David Cronenberg. David Cronenberg, como también sabéis, es una figura clave para entender el cine de las últimas décadas. Evidentemente, al pensar en él, pensamos automáticamente en los géneros puros, en el fantástico, en el terror, pero es verdad que cubre un espectro muy amplio y creo que en su filmografía, sobre todo, es valiosa por la cantidad de ideas, tanto conceptuales como sobre todo visuales, que ha aportado en torno a la realidad, en torno a la condición humana y en torno a nuestros cuerpos. No hace falta dedicarle mucho más a trazar un perfil de David Cronenberg, porque evidentemente es una figura muy importante, con lo que vamos a empezar directamente con las preguntas. Sí que os quiero aclarar una cosa. Como sabéis, después de la gala de esta noche se va a proyectar Crimes of the Future, que es la nueva película de David Cronenberg. Entonces vamos a hacer la mitad de la rueda de prensa, 20 minutos exclusivamente con él, y luego en la segunda mitad de la rueda de prensa entrarán dos de sus productores y se unirán a la conversación. Sois muchos, intentaré dar la palabra al máximo de compañeros posibles. Muchas gracias. Aquí hay una primera. Aquí.
Hola, buenas tardes. Enhorabuena por el premio y la verdad es que es un honor total tenerlo aquí tan cerca debido a la admiración que muchos le tenemos. Me gustaría aprovechar y hacer dos preguntas. La primera es respecto a la literatura. Usted ha escrito un libro titulado Consumidos y, hasta donde yo sé, no ha publicado ningún libro más, ninguna novela más. Quería saber si le apetece escribir más, si no ha publicado más porque no le gustó la experiencia o cuál es la razón. Y la segunda pregunta es, me gustaría hablar, o sea, que hablara... perdón.
Yes, I thought I would be a novelist when I was a young boy. I didn't ever think that I would be making films at all. My father was a writer, and I thought I would be a novelist. I thought I would probably write my first novel by the time I was 20 years old. And then 50 years later, I published that novel. So it took a while for me to... I was kidnapped by cinema, you know. And I still feel that this film that is going to be shown here, Crimes of the Future, it was a surprise for me because I wrote it 20 years ago, and I really thought that I was finished with cinema. About maybe 8 years ago, I thought that was... It's been 8 years since I made a film. But I never thought that I would not be creative, though. I thought that I would probably write another novel. And I think if I wrote a screenplay that could not be produced because it was too extreme or too strange or just not commercial enough, I would probably turn that into a novel also. So I still feel I'm a novelist. I still think it's possible that I will end up writing another novel. But I don't know when, I don't know what it'll be. But it's still a very basic impulse for me to write a novel.
¿Hay aquí otra pregunta?
Congratulations for your career, Mr. Cronenberg. I want to ask you, how is your relationship with Viggo Mortensen? Since History of Violence is like your pet actor. How is working with him? How is your relationship with his work?
My relationship with Viggo, we are in love with each other. and we continue to be. He's at the moment about to shoot a Western in Mexico. And at one point, I was going to act in that film as well. But we're very close. We're friends. I mean, I have good relationships with almost all my actors, but it's rare that you have a real friendship. But we are friends, and we know each other's families and so on. And so, really, I think Viggo is such a good actor, he could be in almost any movie, you know. That's my usual feelings about him. But it's the truth is, no matter how good an actor is, sometimes you don't have a role, you know, for that actor. So I won't say that he could be in every movie that I do, but more than any other actor, for sure.
Señor Cronenberg, felicidades por el Premio Donostia tan merecido. La pregunta es, ¿por qué esa tendencia de querer llevar siempre al espectador al límite?
You can speak louder.
Okay,
Yeah.
of pushing the spectator, the looker, the audience to the limit.
Yes. What about it?
Why that tendency of pushing the audience to the limit in your films?
Well, it's not so much that I'm pushing the audience, I'm pushing myself. And then I invite the audience to come along and have the same experience. So I don't feel, many years ago, Alfred Hitchcock talked about the audience, and he felt that he was like the puppet master, you know, and the audience were puppets, and he would manipulate them, and he would make them be afraid, he would make them make them laugh, make them happy, and he would control everything. I don't understand that at all, because for me, I am experiencing what I create as I create it. And it's like I go on a creative journey, exploring myself, my relationship with the world. I invent things, I see how it feels to invent those things. Do they reveal some truth, something interesting, something entertaining? And then I say to the audience, here's what I was thinking. This is something I imagined. See what you think. So I'm not really trying to push the audience, you know. I'm really, as I say, I'm pushing myself.
Hola, hi. Me gustaría preguntarle, bueno, un premio Donostia es un premio a toda una carrera llena de éxitos y de premios. Me gustaría preguntarle qué significan para usted cuando llegan estos reconocimientos, si le hace pensar en todas las películas que ha hecho, en la trayectoria, en los lugares que ha transitado, o si no hay ninguna reflexión en ello.
Well, I'm lucky enough to have had quite a few awards in my life. I've been making films for 50 years, so but it's always beautiful to have your work recognized, and especially in a place like Donostia, with such a cultural and deep historical background, and a festival that has been very important for many years, and so it encourages me to continue in the future. I used to think if you got an award for your whole career, they were basically saying, now basta, it's just enough, you know, stop making films. But I now realize that it's not that, it's really to say, keep making films.
¿Qué una pregunta?
Hola, enhorabuena por tu premio más que merecido. Pensando en tu carrera como director, me venía una cosa que comentó en su día Kubrick, ¿no? Una conversación que tuvo Kubrick con Spielberg, donde le preguntaba qué era para Spielberg lo más desafiante para él como cineasta. Y él le preguntó que salir del coche que le llevaba cada día al rodaje. Y me preguntaba, viniendo aquí, qué es lo más desafiante como director después de tantos años para David Cronenberg.
Getting out of the car. He replied, so what would be that for you, the most difficult thing as a director for you?
Nothing is difficult, really. It's not difficult. It's very pleasant. That's all I can say. I've not had any trouble getting out of the car. In fact, sometimes I drive the car. So.
Buenas y gracias por estar aquí también. En sus películas suele plantear muchas inquietudes sobre nuestras relaciones con la tecnología, con Internet, con los videojuegos, con la realidad virtual, con la televisión. Me gustaría saber si a día de hoy cree que alguna de esas predicciones que ha tenido en cierto modo se han cumplido y cuáles son sus inquietudes personales ahora mismo en un futuro inmediato.
Well, you know, one of the problems we had with translation here was because I have hearing aids, you know, and also just recently I had cataract eye surgery, so I have new lenses in my eyes. The lenses that saw things for the last 75 years are gone. I now have new lenses in my eyes and new hearing, all technologically enhanced. And so I am bionic. I am the future.
Begoña, por favor.
Sí, aquí. Yo le quería preguntar al señor Cronenberg, en esta película usted se hace la pregunta de si seremos capaces de mutar para comer nuestros propios residuos en este mundo que estamos destrozando. Lo que le quiero preguntar es que ya no tiene confianza en que podamos solucionar el destrozo que hemos hecho.
Yeah, I have my worries about how successful we can be fixing the things that we have launched into the world. But as long as we have the will to change it, I think we could. The problem is, of course, you have craziness like the war in Ukraine and events like that constantly, aside from just the climate change and all the other things that I think are quite obviously human activity has contributed to. We also have that incredible impulse to destroy that we have. That is real, and that, of course, many, including, of course, Sigmund Freud, have commented on. So I think it's a serious problem, and it's a seriously dark question to ask whether we actually can fix it or have we gone too far now. I don't know the answer. I'm not that optimistic, I must say.
Una pregunta aquí atrás.
Hi, Mr. Cronenberg. Thank you for existing, first of all. And in the past 20 years, you've been doing incredible short films like Camera, Consumed. I would like to hear the importance of the format short films to you now. And if you could possibly tell us a few words about your next project with Vincent Cassel.
Sorry, the last part I couldn't...
The next project with Vincent Cassel.
Sorry, I couldn't...
Your last project with Vincent Cassel.
The next project. Yeah, okay. Yes, I mean, I've always been interested in access to technology, and digital technology, cameras, phones. You can now make a movie with your phone that would be quite a good movie, if it's a good phone. And so in order to play with that, I have always made short films that would use some technology that normally would not be considered professional. The last couple of short films I made were with, just very available consumer cameras or even phones. And in fact, there are some moments in Crimes of the Future that were shot with an iPhone. I won't say which, but you could probably figure it out. So that fascinates me because technology, film technology, used to be quite complex, and it's still fairly complex, but it's very accessible. The idea of recording sound separately and film separately and putting them together and then finding a way to edit those together, that was always a huge problem when I was beginning my film career. So I like to experiment with it, and so that I have some insight into what some young filmmakers might be deciding to do in terms of accessing technology. Excuse me one second. When I started filmmaking in the 1960s, it was really the New York underground and the underground film movement that was our inspiration, because they were saying you don't have to be part of the Hollywood system or any film system. You can just go rent a camera and make a movie yourself anytime you want. And it was difficult then, more than now, but it was still that was the exciting part, that you could actually do that. It was a huge revelation to me to realize that I could make a film, because in Toronto, my hometown in Canada at the time, nobody was making movies. Movies came from Hollywood or they came from Europe, but they didn't come from Toronto, Canada. But the New York underground really said, no, you can make a film in Toronto or anywhere you want. And so that's part of what the short films have meant to me, just to keep in touch with that availability of technology. The next film that I'll be making is called The Shrouds, and it would star Vincent Cassel and Léa Seydoux. Despite that, it's not a French film. But, of course, I work with Léa on Crimes of the Future, and I've worked with Vincent on Eastern Promises and A Dangerous Method. So I'm very happy to reconnect with those actors. And it's in some ways, a very personal project for me. People who know me will know what parts of it are autobiographical. But there will be people who see it and will not see that at all. So we'll see what happens. The idea is to shoot that in the spring in Toronto.
¿Hay aquí una pregunta?
Señor Cronenberg, yo quisiera saber, cuando usted era joven y se iniciaba en el cine, ¿le dio en algún momento temor el hacer cosas no comerciales? De repente algún productor lo presionaba. La idea de hacer algo no comercial, de repente no le daba temor de ingresar a una zona oscura.
No, I was never really pushed by producers to do more commercial things. I mean, they weren't interested in me at all, so they didn't push me. No, I mean, I think I made 2 underground films, which were called Stereo and Crimes of the Future, as it turns out. I made my first Crimes of the Future in 1970, and the new Crimes of the Future last year. But it's not as simple. I don't live in Hollywood, So if I don't do anything, nobody cares what I do. I mean, it's not as though I have producers, after me to do commercial movies. It turns out that some of the movies that I wrote and wanted to make were commercial, and it wasn't my intention, but they were, the genre of films, horror films, sci-fi films. So there was a place for them, and then some other films like Dead Ringers, for example, was very difficult to get made. It was not considered a commercial movie, but ultimately, so it's not quite as simple, I guess, as you think it might be in terms of. I'm not like an innocent, naive filmmaker who's surrounded by evil, mercenary producers. Although you'll see 2 mercenary, evil producers soon.
De hecho, van a aparecer ya porque vamos a pasar a la segunda parte de la rueda de prensa, más centrada, si es posible, en vuestras preguntas en Crimes of the Future, la nueva película de David Cronenberg, con lo que vamos a invitar a participar al productor Robert LANTOS y a la productora Laura LANKTREE. Pues aquí tenemos una pregunta.
Mr. Cronenberg, what prompted you to make a movie about your own death? What prompted you to make a movie about your own death? Yes.
I think everybody should make a movie about their own death. I think it will clarify things for you. I think it's really a meditative thing, I mean, all religions, and I'm completely not religious, I'm a total atheist, but most religions encourage you to think about your own death. And most philosophies encourage you, amongst other things, to think about your own death, about what life is not. And so as a filmmaker, that's my mode of expression, is to say, well, I mean, part of the encouragement was that the corpse of me, my corpse in this short film, in this film I get into bed with my corpse. You might not have seen it. It's called The Death of David Cronenberg, and you can probably find it on YouTube or someplace. We created a corpse of me for a TV series called Slasher that I acted in Canada. And I was kind of an evil guy, and I end up dead in a refrigerator, in a freezer. So I had there was this corpse, and I asked the special effects people if I could have that corpse, bring it to my house and take it upstairs and put it in the bed of my daughter, who no longer lived there because she was now married and has her own kids. And so there I was in my house, and there I had this corpse that I had quite a strong relationship to, because when the special effects people showed it to me, you see, they molded it from me. So they put stuff all over your face, and they make a really perfect version of you in silicone. It's really very realistic, but it's dead and slightly rotting a little bit. So I thought, I really have to do something with this corpse because I have this relationship with it, and I feel some empathy. And so I made this. It's really 59 seconds, but it really will tell you something, basically about a person confronting his own death and his relationship with his dead, non-existent self. So for me, philosophically and cinematically, that was an obvious thing to do.
Hello to you three. I have a question for you three, actually. At the beginning, it was only for Mr. Cronenberg, but I would like to know if you have any advice to give to young filmmakers, not to the press, but to young filmmakers. And you take a lot of risks, I think, and this is great. And what would that be?
It's very hard for me to give advice, sort of useful advice, because the times have changed so much. I mean, when I started making films, it was 50 years ago, and everything was different. Not just the technology, but the world economy and politics, and everything has changed. So I don't really feel I have the wisdom to give advice that would be useful. Of course, in general, what can I say? I mean, you have to be strong. You have to accept your limitations. You have to understand whether you have talent or you don't. It's not enough just to feel that, yes, I think I would like to be a filmmaker. Just like you would say, I would like to be a football player, But do you have the talent? Do you have the stamina? Do you have the intensity? Are you willing to suffer? My son is a filmmaker. And 8 years ago, I said, I think I'm finished with filmmaking. I'm just not willing to suffer anymore. And my son said to me, well, I am willing to suffer. And I said, good, because you will. And he has he's just finished his third film now, but he has suffered, So there are things very personal that only you can know. That's why I don't really feel I have technical advice, but not sort of philosophical life advice. I'm sorry.
Well, usually when people send me their sons, nephews, nieces, cousins for advice, I suggest that they don't do that. It's a bad idea. But if they insist, I say, well, my advice is that if there is anything else you can do in your life other than this, do it. Because only ones who are suited for a career in film are those who there's nothing else they can do, so they have no choice. It was difficult when I first started, and I think it's even more difficult now. So it's not for the faint of heart, like David said.
I agree.
Well, I'll try and lighten it up a little bit. I mean, my goodness. But, I mean, as far as the suffering goes, I would say since you are going to suffer, make sure that you align yourself with projects that you believe in, and that you're working with filmmakers that you believe in, because it is going to be difficult. And a lot of stories come across your desk, and I would say the ones to pursue are the ones that you feel need to be made. This was a story that people needed to hear.
Hay una pregunta aquí de una compañera.
Buenas. A mí me gustaría preguntarle a David acerca de las nuevas olas que se inspiran en él, como por ejemplo, se me viene a la cabeza Julia Ducournau, y qué se siente al ser un modelo a seguir. Y a los productores también me gustaría preguntarles si se siente como dar un salto de fe por aquellas películas que se salen más de la norma, ir a lo complicado y no a lo fácil o a lo comercial.
Right. Well, it's very satisfying for me to have people say to me that I was an inspiration or a model or something like that. I mean, that's very sweet and very satisfying. That's not the reason I'm making movies, of course, but Julia Ducournau is, she has been a big supporter of mine, and I in turn have been a big supporter of hers too. So it gives you a whole new family of filmmakers who are not your contemporaries in terms of age, but they are your contemporaries in terms of the intensity of your cinema and the style of your cinema and so on. So it's like a whole new family that you find, and that's very encouraging, and it keeps me going. So it's good, it's sweet for them, but it's also very sweet for me too.
No sé si entendí exactamente lo que me estás preguntando.
El hecho de arriesgar por películas que igual no tienen tanto recorrido como podría tener, no sé, no quiero ir a lo de siempre, pero una película de Marvel siempre va a tener más éxito que algo que se sale de la norma. cómo se siente el hecho de apostar por los cineastas más de nicho.
Hacer una película independiente es tan difícil y dura tanto tiempo que para mí solo vale la pena si es algo que es esencial para que está hecho, algo que verdaderamente vale la pena. Y para mí Marvel Comics, bueno, yo sé que estoy en una muy pequeñita minoría, pero esto no vale 2 o 3 años de mi vida.
Hay una pregunta ahí atrás.
Hi, first congratulations on the award. And then I want to ask the three of them, how was working in this movie with Kristen Stewart and Lea Seydoux? I hope I say the name correct. And how was working with them and making all those graphic scenes? Thank you. ¿Qué está diciendo? Ah, vale. I want, bueno, how was working with Kristen Stewart and with Lea Seydoux? Or how was working with them and making the graphic sense with the artists? The horror, the more horror scenes.
Bueno, yo creo que...
No sé, es que lo que quiero... Las escenas gráficas, muy gráficas, ¿no? Con...
All right,
Sí,
I understand.
claro.
Okay, so, well, working with Lea and Kristen was lovely, wonderful. I mean, I usually have a very good rapport with my actors, and this was also the case with Kristen and Lea. They're both very different women and very different actors. But as a director, you learn the context of each actor and what they work well with and what they don't, and so on. So it's just very natural. So I guess they were both lovely. They were both really, really good. I was very impressed, particularly by Kristen, because I hadn't really seen her do the kind of things that she was needed to do in the movie. And she was very enthusiastic and very professional. It was totally lovely. And in terms of the graphic design, well, it's always, whether you're inventing new things or old things. I work with Carol Spear, who is a production designer I've worked with for maybe 50 years. And we work with designers now. Now a lot of it is on computer and rather than physical designing, but still it's the same thing. I wrote the script. I have great details. I describe in great detail the ambience, the design, the lighting, everything. But even so, it's still not the same thing as actually creating it. And so you have people who read the script and then they make suggestions. They say, is this what you want? Is this not what you want? And sometimes what I wrote reads well. It reads as though it could be possible. But then when you see the actual design based on that, it's not really very good. For example, what in the film is called the orchid bed, which you first see Viggo Mortensen character lying in this bed. Initially in the script, I called it the spiderweb bed because it was to be shaped like a spiderweb. But when we tried to design that, it really didn't work very well. It didn't look good, and physically it was not going to be possible to make it work the way I described it. So I completely had to rethink it It's still organic, but more now we call it like an orchid, you know, like a flower, a plant. So it's a gradual process of development and working with other people who have suggestions. I don't draw very well, so I need someone who can really show me some possibilities. And there are several people who do that. It's the same with the costumes, you know. It's a matter of development, evolution. It takes quite a bit of time. People are very interested mostly in the shooting of the film because you're working with the actors and so on. But the preparation for a film is really where you have either doomed yourself to failure or you've at least given yourself a chance of success. So it's really in the preparation that all of those things happen.
Una pregunta aquí atrás.
Well, hi, sir. Thank you for your time. Quería saber, muchas veces se ha dicho que la grandeza de su cine radica en que nos está enseñando algo que no se supone que deberíamos estar viendo. Entonces le quiero preguntar, ¿Crimes of the Future es una vuelta a esa esencia, digamos, siente que ha vuelto a eso? Y bueno, y primero si está de acuerdo con esa afirmación. Muchas gracias.
Yes, I think there's some truth in that. I think some time ago I made a speech about the crime of art, that art is in essence criminal and that artists are criminals. And my argument was based on the Freudian understanding that civilization is repression. That in order to have civilization, we have repressed certain instincts, impulses, you know, to murder, to rape, to kill, to do all these things. We read about this in the newspapers all the time, but most people do not do these things. And that's how we have a society where we can all meet in a room and we talk and we're not killing each other.
Yet.
Yet. But art, the appeal of art is to the unconscious, to those unconscious parts of ourselves that are still primitive and destructive. And so in that way, we as artists are exploring those things that are hidden, that are forbidden, that are not to be acted upon in society, but still need to be understood and to be expressed. So in that sense, yes, I feel that the attraction of cinema in some way has always been what is forbidden. Whether it's as simple as sex in a time of repression when sex was not to be shown on the screen, to other more obscure kinds of impulses like the ones that you might see in Crimes of the Future. So I hope to commit more crimes in the future. By making more films.
¿Hay aquí otra pregunta?
I have a question. Do you feel as an artist vindicated after knowing that 30 and 40 years later, some of your films are being called prophetic or prescient or ahead of their time in terms of how they diagnose society ailments and our relationship with technology? Or do you feel it's utterly depressing that your films, which are some of them are quite pessimistic, are growing more urgent with each passing day?
Well, you know, I mean, I've often said that to me, as a filmmaker, it's not my job, my mandate to be a prophet. You know, I'm not trying to predict the future or suggest. I'm not a politician either. It's not my job to suggest ways that we could avoid certain things in the future. So, but I do. But as, for example, people like to talk about Videodrome, which seem to anticipate the internet and interactive television and so on and so on. Really, I think as an artist, you have antennae that are very sensitive, maybe more sensitive than other people, or at least you are listening to the reception of things through these antennae, these sensors that you have, and you are playing with those, and you're creating narratives based on what you take in. And sometimes you end up, maybe I would say accidentally, predicting some things very accurately in the future, you know. So I don't feel that, as I say, that's not my impulse, is not to predict, and I'm not preaching, it's not a religion. I'm not trying to warn people about things, but inevitably I will stumble across some things that are disturbing, that are destabilizing, perhaps, and those things end up in the film, you know, and then of course you react to them. So that's, to me, that's the process, really.
Hay una pregunta aquí atrás.
Hola, muchas gracias David por estar aquí con nosotros. Y yo creo que vivimos una era de una especie de puritanismo o autocensura en los autores. ¿Usted en su carrera profesional ha sentido alguna vez que alguien le ha censurado o le ha intentado censurar de alguna manera sus ideas o su cine? Pero más que censura en las ideas, censura económica, a la hora de falta de financiación o algún tipo de censura.
Yes, well, there's always, you know, you don't make films in a vacuum. You make them in a social context and an economic context and a cultural context. So there are always pressures of many kinds that can shape you, push you, derail you, perhaps, and it's a complex thing making a film, because it's involving a lot of technology and a lot of people and a lot of other people's money too. So it's not unusual to find yourself in the position where you perhaps are tempted to self-censor, and I have tried to resist that. I have actually been censored. I've had pieces of my film cut and taken out of the films in the past, in Canada, I must say. But on the other hand, against that, there's a very strong internal pressure I have to do what I want. It's very intolerant. It's very childish. I just want to do what I want. So, and yet I need to bring a lot of other people along with me in order to do this. I have to have producers who are willing to produce the film, and that is a much more complex thing than just raising money. That's part of it, but that's not the only thing. So producers, you need to work with the right people, and then together you end up resisting. I mean, Robert and I, we made Crash. It was great pressure to cut the film, to change the film, to get a better rating in the U.S. It was censored in many places, and for me to do that alone would have been very difficult. I needed an ally, a colleague, and you need those on the producing level, and you also need that in the film. You need actors who are willing to do these things, to work with you on these films, knowing that there will be pressure applied to them, against them. You need a lot of very courageous people when you're making a film that is anything but totally mainstream. So the answer is a complex one, you know, it's not simple. And you have to find your own way. I mean, you have to decide, you know, about the money, about the ability to make films that you want to make. It's not an easy thing. It's another reason why we're talking about, you know, advice to young filmmakers. This is, when we say it's difficult, this is just one of the many things that you would run into if you decide to, if you get involved in making films.
Hay una pregunta aquí.
Buenas. Yo me preguntaba si hay alguna otra película en la carrera de David que tenga en mente llevar a cabo en algún momento un remake y si llevado el momento, cedería la idea o el guión de alguna de estas películas a otro director y quién cree que estaría capacitado para hacerlo.
No, I would never really want to remake any of my movies. I mean, once you've done them, you know, and they are a product of their time and their place. There's a TV series right now being made by Rachel Weisz, the actress, of Dead Ringers, my movie Dead Ringers, and there was a remake of Rabid. Almost all of my early films, and especially, there have been suggestions of remakes and so on. Shivers, Rabid, The Brood, Scanners, Videodrome, all of those people have thought about remaking. Certainly The Fly, in fact, there was a sequel to The Fly, and then have been suggestions to do a remake of The Fly. But as I say, I have no interest in that, you know, I mean, it's just, I've done it, you know, to rethink it in a new context and so on, it might be interesting to see. I don't think there's any filmmaker who really wants there to be a remake of their movies. I'd rather they just let them be where they are in the past. But, and so therefore I wouldn't, the idea of my thinking that there might be a filmmaker who should remake, you know, Crimes of the Future, that would never occur to me. I mean, I have no impulse to even think about that.
Vale, una pregunta aquí.
You will remake Crimes of the Future. I can see that now. I can sense this.
Hi. First of all, congratulations on your award. And seeing as you are a reference for many fans of horror movies, I wanted to ask you, what's your take on what's now being called as elevated horror movies like Hereditary, Midsommar? It follows that people think they are changing the landscape for horror filmmaking. What's your take on this new wave of horror films?
Yeah. I don't have a take on it, actually, because I am not seeing those movies very often. I haven't really followed the genre particularly. I don't know why. I mean, there was a time when I was sort of definitely making horror films, and I was very interested, of course, in what else was being done within the genre. But right now, it's not. Unless there's some very special film, like, let's say, Titan, which technically you could say is a horror film, then I'm interested. I was interested in that because of its unique, you know, angle. But I have no words of wisdom, I'm afraid. You know, I'm not really. I haven't seen enough of the films. I don't really know the filmmakers.
Tenemos tiempo para una última pregunta y aquí hay una compañera que había pedido mano hace un rato.
Hi, congratulations. So do you have any red lines in terms of some topics that you rather not show or film? Because it seems that you are somehow fearless and that there's literally nothing that you would reject, but perhaps there's a particular subject that you left off the table in your movies.
I haven't yet made a movie about dogs. Maybe that's in the future. That's a sort of forbidden topic, but yeah, I don't really think about it. I mean, obviously there are. You know, I just was having a dinner with the French filmmaker Catherine Breillat. You know her, and she really does push the sexual envelope in her films. She basically ends up at times shooting what you would in other circumstances consider porno, because she's having her actors actually have sex on screen and all of that. I'm glad that she's doing it. I don't have to do it. that's not something to me that is particularly interesting, you know, for me to do. So there are things that one could do in cinema that I just don't find that interesting. But it's not exactly that I'm afraid of it. It's just that I don't see the value in it, even though I've directed many sex scenes per se. But I'm sure there are. It's really a matter of context, you know. It's because the purpose of my filmmaking is not to shock the audience. It's so easy to shock an audience. I mean, the dogs that I talked about, all you have to do is have a really nice little puppy dog and then have it killed for real in front of you. And you'll get a big reaction from many people on the internet, and you will be canceled forever. But artistically, that's nothing. You know, creatively, that's not anything. So shock per se is not something that I'm interested in, really. As I say, it's something I say, this is interesting to me, this is disturbing to me, I'm not sure what it means to me, but I'm creating a narrative around it to see, perhaps to understand why I'm feeling this way, and you, the audience, you come with me. So, for example, talking about the idea that our bodies are modifying under the pressures of the environment and technology, that interests me, and it always has interested me. So, the fact that I'm in the last film, we have people who can actually eat plastic, who can live on technological material. Once again, it's not exactly something that I'm predicting, but it's something that is interesting, you know, and it is a possibility. And there are scientists who have said that they have created plastic that people can eat. This is based on bacteria. There are bacteria that can live on eating plastic invented by humans. That's pretty fascinating, and that's 50 million years of evolution of bacteria that allows them to do crazy stuff like that. So it's almost, I'm being the junior scientist, you know, thinking about that, rather than saying, this is what we must do in the future, or if we don't do something now, this is where we will have to go in the future. That isn't the purpose for me to make the movie. However, when you see it, and if that's the thought that comes to you, then that's legitimate, you know. So that's more like the way I approach it. As I say, it's not to say I was the first one to do this on film.
Bueno, muchas gracias. Creo que es de estos casos que venimos a una rueda de prensa y asistimos a una masterclass, con lo que muy agradecidas a David Cronenberg, uno de los premios Donostia de este año, y también al resto, aparte del equipo de Crimes of the Future, que se proyecta esta noche, que son sus productores Robert y Laura. Muchísimas gracias y muchísimas felicidades por vuestra película. Gracias.